Welcome to the Heart-Led Business Show, where compassion meets commerce and leaders lead with love. Join your host, Tom Jacobs, as he delves into the insightful conversations with visionary business leaders who defy the status quo, putting humanity first and profit second. From heartfelt strategies to inspiring stories, this podcast is your compass in the world of conscious capitalism. So buckle up and let your heart guide your business journey.
Ladies and gents, grab your gears and tune your ears because we're about to dive deep with Purdeep Sangha, known as many as the strategist. He's a concoction of charisma and cognition, an author, TV show host, and the godfather of mindful alpha male, set to spice up your life with sizzling success strategies. He's proof you can prosper in your profession and still be a sensation with your wife and kids. So stick around if you're ready for a thrilling ride into the realm of the heart-led hustle here on the Heart-Led Business Show. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a fantastical, fruitful ride. Well, Purdeep, welcome to the show.
Tom, thanks. I appreciate the introduction there. That was awesome. Thank you.
No worries. I always like to spice things up a little bit at the beginning of the show. Set the tone. But tell me, what's your definition of a heart-led business?
Well, for me, it's simply, do I feel good about the business that I do? And do I feel good about it day in and day out? And if we take a look at a little bit of a deeper definition, it's we're doing good stuff for good people, and it's what we consider a win-win-win. So it's a win for our clients, it's a win for us, and it's a win for a broader community or ecosystem. So that's our definition as a whole.
Okay. No, I like that. That's really cool. And especially like that you can feel good about what you're doing as well. Does that correspond with the whole philosophy of do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that because we do a lot of studies on performance. Like that's one of our organizations is all about performance in the workspace. And we have done very heavy studies on that and work in that area. And yeah, passion is a key element to driving inspiration and keeping people. I like to use the word inspiration, but the typical term out there is motivation, but keeping people inspired and keeping them inspired at that optimal level. And that's what inspiration leads to performance, like individual performance, which leads to business performance, but it also leads to happier customers and clients and happier team members. So when team members are passionate and other team members feel that, it just creates a higher level of energy within the organization. I just did a workshop on this yesterday and the day before that about this whole concept of energy and passion and what that does for business and how that drives results. So there's a lot to be said about being passionate, the energy that it creates, the business results that it creates, and the impact that it creates.
Yeah, that's interesting because if you think about most kind of profit-led businesses, it's kind of the opposite way around. It's like, let's look at the bottom line, let's look at the numbers, and screw the people. If they don't like their job, we can get somebody else in here. And from your definition, it's kind of flipping that around and saying, we need to develop our people so that they're happy, and happy employees lead to happy customers, lead to happy shareholders, and happy owners and happy profits. I like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that old way of doing business has really not fallen apart, but you could see it's changing now. It has significantly changed over the last 10 years in terms of I'm going to say, value that people put in their people. Leaders put in their people, I should say. Especially through COVID, there's been a huge, huge uptake. Like it's incredible. It's shifted significantly where organizations now are paying more attention to the well-being of their employees. For example, some of the organizations used to not even have any mental health coverage. Now they do. Some organizations had $2,000, and I'm talking about here in Canada in particular, had $2,000 a year in mental health coverage, and some of them have bumped it up to $10,000. And I'm surprised to see which organizations have and have not. For example, my wife is a nurse practitioner, and she works in a cancer ward. She leads a cancer ward in a Toronto hospital, Sunnybrook Hospital, and they haven't bumped up their mental health. And I'm like, holy crow, through COVID, they're the ones that took the biggest hits.
Yeah.
And were I still remember my wife, like they were stressed, extremely stressed. The system was stressed. The people were stressed. They didn't choose to bump that up. So it's interesting to see the difference in different organizations and what they've done and what they haven't done. But to bring it back to what you were talking about, yeah, you got to have people that are motivated and inspired. And in order for you to do that, now, from my belief, like we're talking about heart-led businesses, there has to be a balance. And the balance is it's not just on the organization to provide stuff for the employees. Like I think that's a complete misconception here. And I think a lot of people have abused it. And we're heading down that way right now in society where there's a sense of entitlement versus, earning something and being responsible yourself. That's the way society is going. You're my employer. You owe me this versus, hey, I have a role to play in this too. Maybe I need to invest in this in some way, shape, or form. And we know if you take a look at employees who have employee assistance programs, I apologize if I'm going down a rabbit hole.
That's fine.
But employee assistant programs, a lot of them aren't taking advantage of it, or they're not taking advantage of it effectively or following through with the stuff. So there's an onus on both sides when it comes to being heart-led. Yes, employers need to do what they can to help support employees, but employees need to take ownership as well.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up EAPs. So I worked in corporate for a while, and we had the employee assistance program. It was almost frowned upon. Like that was a feeling that I got from when the HR person was like, well, we have this program and you can talk to them if you want. It's like, wow, you're really giving a great endorsement for people to really take advantage of a program like that. And then on the flip side, when I had my fitness business, I started working for a company that was contracted to provide speakers at different, for different topics. And so I would go into different companies, and it was paid by their EAP program. And it was always interesting, the different businesses that would go into, sometimes, they'd just be eating lunch, like, okay, I get a free lunch and I can I can hear somebody talk, but I'm not going to really pay attention. That was, 15 years ago, of course. So I sure hope things have changed since.
I know I was doing a number of sessions for CEOs in particular and senior leaders over the last couple of days. And I know they are paying attention because we have the results. We have some survey results. We do a lot of private studies. And one of the private studies that we did yesterday was on burnout. And it was pretty telling. There were a lot of people, roughly 83% of people that we had surveyed. And it was a significant size. It was relevant, you can say, statistically relevant. And 83%. And the question was, do you know someone who have you, or do you know someone who has been burnt out over the last 2 years, within the last 2 years? And 83% said yes.
Wow.
And so, yeah. And are you experiencing burnout or any burnout symptoms currently? It was about 78%, I believe. 78, 79%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's high. Mental health has gone up on the rise. I have my theories around that, but that's a different subject there.
Whole other show.
That's a whole other show. But yeah, it really comes down, and people are more aware of it now, that taking care of employees is a good business strategy now because it's a competitive advantage. How do you keep good people? How do you get good people, and how do you keep them?
Yeah. And I like what you were saying earlier as well, that it's not 100% on the employer, but it's a shared responsibility between the employee and the employer as well.
Yeah, that's important. And the reason why I say this is because we have an entire organization, as I mentioned, it's called the Executive Lab, which is all about helping organizations, team members, and teams perform at a significantly higher level. It's performance training. It's not specific skill training. And we teach people how to perform better. And what we know is that people do not take accountability for their own performance, the vast majority of people. And so even when they have a coach by their side, they need a lot of pushing. Accountability is the number one challenge, I would say, in the corporate world, in the business world, because there's a lot of people that are supposed to be responsible for stuff or have a part of the job description or job duties or whatever it is. And we're seeing this climb significantly, Tom. Like, it's changing now, even in the academic world, because I have a lot of friends who are professors and university professors, and they're saying the same thing. Students are coming in and saying, oh, I need an extension for this without any valid, legitimate reason. There's a whole sense of entitlement. And especially in the business world now, we're seeing this, particularly in Canada. It's a little bit less in the US, but it is happening quite a bit.
Oh, that's crazy. So I kind of skipped over the next question that I usually ask is a little bit about your background, your business, and what inspired you to have a heart-led business.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm going to try to keep it short, but I think I have to give full context to explain why. But my parents were immigrants, and they immigrated over in the early 70s, and they had my brother and I, and they just worked hard. They didn't have any formal education. They just worked hard, and eventually they worked on an orchard. and they eventually bought their own and built a business, and it was successful, and they never worried about money from that perspective. But I was always fascinated about, well, what made my parents different than anybody else? So other people were complaining about not making money. My parents were fine, and they're doing great. So what are the business principles that they were putting in place? So I started to study that at a very young age. Plus other businesses around us, I would just study and I'd be like, especially the majority were family businesses. So I was like, okay, what makes this family business better? Then I got into studying the brain. It just so happened I had a substitute teacher in I believe it was a grade 6, came up. He was from Europe and he had moved to Canada and he was substitute teaching. And he wrote a bunch of words on the chalkboard at that time, chalkboards, and put circles around them and lines between the words and said, this is a mind map. And that moment on, I was just completely hooked and fascinated because even for the next 20 something years, people were not talking about mind maps. I remember I was the first person in pretty much every organization to bring in mind mapping into teams. So I asked him, I said, what is this? What is this mind map? And he said, you know what, if you're interested, go look up, that time it wasn't internet, but he go look up books, right? Go in the library, a public library, and look up inventors like Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci and so forth. And they all talk about a very similar concept, right? Which is mind mapping, putting your concept down on paper, whether it's thought bubbles or whatever it is. It's basically concept thinking, right? And I was hooked from that because I started to read that. Then I started to read on brain science at that time, which is now called neuroscience. So I started to study that at a very young age. And then at 17, I was a personal trainer. So fitness was a big part of my life, and I wanted to help other people get fit. I realized that I would put these programs together, and 80% of the people wouldn't do them.
Yeah.
My background academically is also in science, right? I grew up in science and neuroscience and biochemistry and so forth, and then went into the business world, studied business at multiple different places, and being in business too. And I was executive for 14 years. My goal is to be a CEO of a major company. That was my goal. And predominantly in banking, because banking touches every industry. And I had an affinity towards credit unions. I spent most of my time in credit unions. My brother grew up in the banking system. And in Canada, the credit union system is very strong. It's not like the American banking system. The American credit unions are smaller. Right. The Canadian ones are a lot larger and very competitive. And I aligned with the values. Talk about heart-led compared to profit. And I saw this almost every single day between my brother and I, right? He'd be coming back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. Or, they promised us this bonus and they actually pulled it back. Like that's how the banks work, right? If the bank doesn't hit their quarterly profits, but you still hit your targets and you're promised this compensation, they pulled it back.
Wow.
And so what are you going to do? Are you going to go against the big banks who have endless dollars? But the credit unions are not like that. And so that was my goal. That was my mission. And then a number of years ago, about 7 years ago, I decided now I was an entrepreneur. I invested in real estate, did other things. And I said, I'm going to start my own advisory firm. And from there, and it actually happened that I started in the US and grew it from there. And then it kind of expanded into a number of different areas. So fast forward, I'm a husband and I got 2 kids and I have an umbrella, you can say, company that has sub advisory firms where we help business leaders, whether you're a business owner or a CEO or an executive, really help grow and scale their business or their division or department or results, but also help on the personal side. Going back to my years as a personal trainer, knowing that a lot of it has to do with the individual. So we've combined the two. And so that's what we do every single day. We help people. It's ultimately this one question people ask, like, what's your driving factor? It's to answer this one question, which is how can business leaders or professionals perform at their highest potential and live a high quality of life at the same time. So that's what we do.
Yeah. So what does that transformation typically look like for a stressed out CEO that's put on weight and health is bad and second heart attack? What does that transformation look like once you've worked with them?
That is very much the norm. You know that, right? Because being in the industry. Yeah. So what it looks like is, first of all, for the vast majority of people, depending on also their gender, right? Men will hold off till the very end. Women are more open to it. They will come forward depending on the challenges that they're having in their life. And then first step is really awareness, right? And openness. They need to be open. And then what happens is they need to be aware that they need to do something different. And then what it comes down to, depending on their challenge, right? Some of them might have, like you said, the health challenge. So the health challenge for us, we take a look at someone that has a serious condition like that, right? We make sure that, okay, are they actually staying in touch? Because we're not medical doctors from the perspective we're going to take care of your heart disease. We just want to make sure you have someone that's taking care of that. But we have functional medicine expert on our team
Good.
who then takes a look at and says, because the traditional medical system is not going to take a look at that. Where are the root causes? What's the lifestyle like? What's your gut health like? Your blood markers that doctors don't typically look at different things. And then we will also connect them. We have an extended team. We will connect them with the right professionals from a fitness perspective, because we don't do fitness. We do health and nutrition. Fitness is a different category that we don't focus on. We focus a lot on the cognitive, emotional, and physical health from an integrative medicine perspective, but not necessarily fitness, right? So we will connect them with the right professional if they want to work out, have a workout plan and regimen and that kind of stuff. So that's what it kind of looks like. And then we work with them and we touch base with them. When I say touch base, it's more like an advisory/coaching at least once a month, if not twice a month. Some of our programs are group, right? Some of our programs there's a group of executives. So everybody's speaking the same language. And I think, Tom, this is the most important thing is if you take people through as a group, then no one feels isolated, because we worked with individuals like a CEO we do a lot of private and confidential work, right? No one on our team, like some of the work that I do, no one on my team even knows that we have this client. So some of that, because they're going through some private challenges, like, okay, so they've had a heart attack, but they don't want anybody to know. Like they don't want anybody to know, because you can't be a CEO of a major corporation and it publicly be out there that they've suffered 2 heart attacks. The stock prices dropped. So this sensitivity and confidentiality is very, very important. So add on that, right? That pressure to these CEOs, because now they can't tell anybody. It's not like they can be public about it to a lot of people, because it's a sign of weakness for them and the organization. So it's kind of how do I say it? Sometimes it's like a dance. You got to be really, really careful in terms of that approach and how you go through it. We had a CEO last year who went into the hospital and I couldn't get a hold of him. I'm like, what happened? I had no clue he was in the hospital. But he literally came out a week and a half later and said, hey, Purdeep, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you, but I was in the hospital and the doctor said I might not make it. They told my wife he's got 48 hours. If he makes it, he makes it. If he doesn't, he doesn't.
Oh, wow.
Because his organs were shutting down. He just did not take care of his health. He thought he came down with COVID and just tried to go. It wasn't COVID. It was another, you can say, a health challenge that he had developed over a period of time, which he completely ignored. And so what does that look like? In this extreme case, he left the organization because it was too high stress, too high pressure. They, as a board of directors, they weren't managing the organization effectively, and he just couldn't deal with it anymore. So it really depends on the person. For some people, they have to make a significant lifestyle change like that. Other people, if you catch it fast enough, then you can transition and make certain lifestyle changes and work changes.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Thinking about bringing in that people aspect to the organization. So you have this high driving executive that is profit driven. You got to get the quarterly results every quarter. How are they bringing in the people aspect when that's not part of the DNA that they grew up with?
Well, I think again, as I think leadership has changed. And I think leaders now realize they need good people. And in order to do that, they got to train them. They got to take care of them. So I think a lot of people are aware of that. Now, the challenge, though, is they have, just like anybody else, they have dilemmas. And the dilemma could be, hey, look, I have this person on my team who I know maybe should be paid more, but we don't have the budget for it. Right? So maybe there's something else that I can do to help this person, right? Maybe something else. Maybe I can give them more vacations. Maybe I can, do something in some other way. Maybe I can acknowledge them more. Maybe I can give them some kind of a task that they love or a project that they love, right? So there's different ways of doing that, but it really comes down to, there's some basic stuff. Every organization should have a career development plan for every single individual, right? And that is what sets the stage, because if you take a look at the career development plan and you keep it updated and the people are working towards it, your results will get better too, and you'll have the budget to be able to help out. But again, it's a tricky one because I'm in business too. I run businesses, and sometimes I'd like to pay people more, but then I'm like, I just need to see more results in that particular area. And I'm a firm believer of performance compensation. Like you perform, and I'm going to pay you the best of the best. And that is, I think as organization, going into this side, I think we need to do more of that, because if people take accountability for their performance and they perform at their top potential and they get paid for it, that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. But here's, Tom, what we also know, here's what stats show and our research shows too. The average person, their performance fluctuates by up to 65%. Any time of the day or any given day of the week. So someone can show up performing at a 9 out of 10 this morning and be performing at a 3 out of 10 this afternoon.
Wow.
And this is the interesting part. They'll give us a technical skill, but it's what we call the performance quotient, which technical skills can help you improve that, but it doesn't necessarily do that. That's why I've spent the last literally 25 years trying to figure out what performance really is. And we finally came up with these elements of performance. Now we go into, when we work with organizations, now we can pinpoint and say, this is what performance is. This is how you measure it. This is how you change it. And we teach people and individuals how to change their own performance, because here I think we're going to have a massive shift in the next 10 years, is we've always put it on leaders to drive performance, right? If you're a better leader, you know how to communicate more, you know how to inspire people, it's going to improve performance, but only to a certain degree, because guess what? You can only inspire them so much or watch them 24/7, right? You're not a babysitter. But if you teach people how to perform better themselves, keep themselves inspired, and understand themselves in terms of how performance works, you're going to be far more effective as a team, as an organization. So that is the difference, and that's what we do. And it's just like anything else. They don't teach us a few core skills in school or even in the workplace. Like in school, they don't teach you about relationships, right? They don't teach you how to have an effective marriage or relationship. Well, that'd be nice, right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, financial management is there. It's starting to come in school, and they're starting to put it in a little bit, but it's still not as effective, right? Relationships, and they don't teach you how to learn. This is the biggest, I'm going to say, excuse my language, screw up of the academic system, is they don't teach you how to learn. There's actually a science behind it. I actually learned this when I was starting the brain science part, where Tom, I had learned how to have photographic memory, study properly. I could go into a test and score 100% without even fully having to study, because there's a science, there's a methodology behind it that you can use, and your brain works a certain way. But we don't teach that in school for kids. But imagine what could happen if we actually taught them how to learn effectively.
Yeah.
So they can actually absorb that material. And then no one teaches us how to perform. And performance is important, unless you're on a sports team. But even on a sports team, it's technical. The performance element, like they're starting to bring more into it. I love, the Ted Lasso is a great show. If anybody hasn't seen it, it's a great show because, they talk about performance psychology in there and the impact of that. And so these different elements now, but coming back to this, I got a little bit off track, but if we paid people based on performance and people knew what performance was, then I believe organizations, it'd be a win-win-win.
So what's the difference between kind of technically doing your job correctly? So let's say, a salesperson, they make all the sales calls, they do all the right things, and they're getting, a 85% close rate on is that performance, or is that just doing the tactics to get to an end result?
No, that is performance, but it's like, what are the elements within that? And I'll just give you a few examples because there's particular elements within that. One is accuracy, right? So how accurate? So whether they're phone calls or the sales proposal, whatever that looks like. The other one is quantity, right? Quantity is another one. Consistency is another factor of performance. Speed is another factor of performance. But here's something what people don't pay attention to. What about feelings? Because feelings have an element of performance. The better you feel, the higher your performance. Okay, this is scientific. This isn't yes, right? We know that. If you have a stomach ache, you're not going to feel as well. If you don't eat effectively, you're not going to perform as well. If you're from an emotional level, because there's 5 different levels of feelings, right? So there's different levels, and if you understand that and you can tackle that and you feel better, you can actually perform better. So there's different elements within, you can say, this framework that you can break down. So now you're taking a look at a salesperson's calls, and now you can say, out of these elements, how effective was it, right?
Okay.
So you're breaking down the duties or the activities, and now breaking it down to the core elements, because now you can replicate it, you can fine tune it, right? Just like in sports, they fine tune things.
Yep.
If you're throwing a basketball, they're going to fine tune, your arm swing, for example, your wrist. So it's just like that. And one thing, for example, that most people don't pay attention to when it comes to performance is unintended consequences. And the example that you just used is a prime one, because we get this a lot. There's a sales 1, 2, maybe even a few great salespeople, but they're not following the process. They're not part of the team culture. They're doing things out of the norm, and everybody else is like, why do they get to do that? And we, that makes no sense. And they're not so great for the culture. So those unintended consequences are now hurting the performance of other people or hindering the performance of other people.
Okay.
So that's a performance element. So these are the things that people or organizations need to take a look at. So we've broken it down. Now when we work with people and leaders, they're like, okay, now we get it. Now we can have a very pinpointed conversation. And it's not anything to do with, hey, you're a bad person or you generalize your performance. Now it's like, here are the 10 elements,
Yeah.
right? And now we can break it down. And so that person can't take it offensively because it's just on a piece of paper, right? It's like saying your handwriting is not within the lines. No, it's not that you have bad handwriting. You just got to put it in between the lines, right?
Yeah.
So if a person takes that offensively, that's their own problem, but they should understand that's part of the requirement.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a really great analogy. And then what you said about the feelings as part of performance, that definitely is not something that is looked at a regular basis. And, it could be that boss that yells all the time that creates that toxic work environment that brings everybody's feelings down, the productivity goes down. But it also could be they had a fight with their spouse in the morning and that productivity is going to be down for that day as well. And I think that's the element that a lot of people miss when looking at kind of overall performance of an employee.
Yeah, absolutely. Feelings, and like I said, there's 5 different levels, and one of them is also personality. Because some people just have a personality of have a baseline level of feelings with their personality. And when they realize the impact that it has on the performance, then we can help them shift it. Or if the impact that it has on other people's performance, right? And so I had this question yesterday from a CEO. Well, what if it's just a person's personality? And my response is this. If you take a look, a lot of people in psychology, there's 2 kind of mindsets, right? One is personality is fixed. Personality is fixed, and you can't change your personality because there's 5 main personality traits. And other people are like, no, you can shift it. If you can flip genes on and off, epigenetics, and you should be able to change your personality to a certain degree. And my belief is that you can change your personality to a certain degree if it's intentional and you're focused on it. Like if you put the work behind it, I do believe you can change your personality over time. But I don't think your personality dictates the feelings that you have as a baseline as a person. That's your mindset. That's how you've grown up. That's basically the people that you've been around. But once you identify what that looks like, then it's not easy, I should say, because it's not easy to change your baseline from a feelings perspective as a person. But when you're more aware, consciously over time, you can do it. Like I've seen people change over the period of a year where they've been not so great in terms of, the feelings that they brought to the table to a lot better. And awareness can be a huge one. There's a CEO that was in the room again yesterday that said, my family, he's like, a few months ago, my family said, you're a suck, you're a drain when it comes to the energy in this house. Like, you just bring bad mood with you. And that was a huge awakening for him. And I give him a lot of credit to be able to share that with a group of other CEOs and be vulnerable. He realized that and he had to change his ways. Now he's not 100% there, but at least it's acknowledged and he's aware of it.
Yeah. I mean, awareness is like the number one thing, right? When there's a problem, you have to be aware that it is a problem before you can address it and fix it. So yeah, that's interesting. And, getting back to kind of the profit and we're kind of wrap up, I want to be cognizant of your time here as well. How does that shift the profit side of it then in terms of balancing the people, the performance, and then making sure that the business is creating a profit at the end of the day?
Well, I think maybe I'm oversimplifying it for people, but I think it makes sense when people understand this. When people are happier and they perform better, then the results will be improved, and then the productivity and the product and the clients, better client experience too. We do a lot of work on client experience. You're going to have a way higher client experience when people are happier and performing better. And guess what? That's going to lead to higher revenues. And bottom line, that's going to lead to higher revenues. And it's also going to be people leading to, there might be a small cost to it, like an investment that you make in training people or programs that you put in or whatever that looks like. But that cost is going to be, it's going to be minimal compared to the profit that a person or an organization is making compared to the results. Take a look at this. Here's an analogy, because a lot of the work that we did, they've done research, billions and billions and billions of dollars of research in the sports industry.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the kind of analogy we brought in the business world. But take a look at it. The best sports teams, for example, rake in the cash.
Yeah.
Right? Because people are excited about it. There's an energy level. They get to the championship. They win the champ. And then, it creates this momentum. So when people perform in an organization, it's a very similar thing, is you just get better results and you make more money, bottom line.
Yeah. And you're winning and everybody loves to win.
Yeah. And so if people are happier, they're coming to work happier, clients are happier, you're making more money. Like that, what else would drive your heart? when we're talking about heart-led business than that, because we have a saying, feel your best, perform your best, achieve your best. It's simply that.
Yeah, I love that. But it can be a problem when cash is tight and you need to install these programs to get everybody happier. But it's like, how do I think you said this a few minutes ago too, is like, we want to invest in our people and all this, but I got bills to pay and these suppliers and all that. And it's at lunchtime. How do you coach a CEO to, find that balance and invest in the people for the long term?
If you don't make enough revenue, you're not going to be able to keep the business because you're not going to be able to grow, expand, innovate, right? And keep up with your competition. So I think people need to understand this, right? I think employees need to understand this. You have to make a significant amount of money within your industry and comparably compared to your competition to be able to be relevant. That is the most important thing. And sometimes that does require letting people go because the industry has shifted, whatever that looks like, and you have to remain competitive. If you take a look at what Steve Jobs did, for example, when he came back to Apple, when he left the first time, he basically pared it down. And this is just a basic strategy for many organizations that are going under, is when they bring a new CEO down, you have to pare it down to the basics now, right? Strip a lot of the excess fat off, whether that's people or divisions or departments or products, and figure out what's working and what's not working. It's part of the system. Now, if the economy drops, right, you have to save the business. And I think there's a difference though, Tom, and the difference is this. There's a difference between greed and understanding sustainability. There's a difference there.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that is there's a core element. Not that I'm against publicly traded companies, because we need them, right? It's a way of investors making money.
Yep.
And they're the largest companies around the world typically. But I have a thing for privately owned companies because they're privately owned and they have one, two, maybe a number of different shareholders that are more intimately involved in the business and understand the people, whereas publicly traded companies are owned by people around the world you don't even know. And their number one goal and gain or reason to be part of that company is to make money, right? And that's why I prefer credit unions over banks, because credit unions, the people that bank there are the owners. They're the shareholders. They're the members. Whereas banks, you're owned by whoever owns the stock and you don't know.
Right.
So there's a different motivation. A publicly traded company, their motivation is bottom line profit growth. That's it.
Yep.
However you have to get to it, it's bottom line profit growth. Whereas a private company could be growth, but still, yes, we need to take care of our people. So that is something that we have to take into consideration. I'm not, again, knocking publicly traded companies, but I think there's a different perspective. And if a privately owned business is getting rid of people to maximize and optimize profit without taking care of the people, then it becomes greed.
I like that. The greed and sustainability. That's a really key differentiator. I like that. That's a good nugget. Cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with the audience. I think this is a great conversation around the heart-led business. How can people get a hold of you if they would like to learn more about what you're doing and the work that you've done?
You can find me at purdeepsangha.com. That's our main website. And I'm most active on LinkedIn, not super active, but out of all the social media profiles and platforms, that's where I actually will respond.
Right.
No Snapchat, no TikTok, Instagram, even minimal. But LinkedIn is the place to feel free to reach out and connect.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I certainly appreciate your time today. And I wish you all the best in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you being an awesome host. So thank you.
No worries. And thank you, listeners, for watching the show today. I really appreciated it. Make sure you're checking out what Purdeep is doing, and all that information is going to be down in the show notes, and we'll be linking all of those social media profiles as well, so that you can get a hold of them if you'd like to. And also, if you could do us a favor and give the show a rating and review, that does help spread the word, and I certainly appreciate that as well. So until next time, lead with your heart.
You've been listening to the Heart-Led Business Show, hosted by Tom Jacobs. Join us next time for another inspiring journey into the heart of business.